An 18-year-old Trump supporter is in big trouble after he tried to intimidate a couple of Kamala Harris volunteers, not just going up to them, but waving a machete at them at the polls. And now he's wearing an orange jumpsuit. Let's discuss. I'm Dave Aronberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida Law Man, here on the MeidasTouch Network. Let's talk about voter intimidation. We saw that in Neptune Beach, Florida, where a group of young men were in a pickup truck, were there with the flags for Trump, were there with the banners, and one of them decided to get a little too close to a couple of volunteers who were holding signs for Democrats. And the 18-year-old held a machete over his head. Yeah, I guess he thought it was a joke, right? Not to the victims here, who reported him to police, and police made an arrest, and he is facing second-degree felony charges, punishable by up to 15 years in prison, including a 3-year mandatory minimum. That's what happens when you are accused of aggravated assault against a person over 65 years old. Yes, one of the two victims was over 65 years old. This takes voter intimidation to another level. You see, voter intimidation by itself is a third-degree felony. It's a lower felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. That's how it is in Florida. That's how it is in most other places. But the difference between what you had here in Florida, outside of Jacksonville and Neptune Beach, and what you probably have seen in other parts of the country, is that when you try to intimidate a voter, you still have free speech rights. You still have First Amendment rights where you can yell things out in support of a candidate. But if you try to coerce someone to either not vote or to vote your way, yes, that's voter intimidation. That's a third-degree felony. There is a little bit of a loophole in the law, though, in many of these places. You can't intimidate or coerce a voter. You can't do that to a poll worker, election worker. Nope. Not even a poll watcher. The people who are allowed to go inside and watch and make sure there are no shenanigans, can't intimidate them either. But the law in Florida, as in many other places, does not specifically make it a crime to try to intimidate someone holding a sign for a candidate. And that's where this guy, this 18-year-old in Florida, Caleb James Williams, that's where he screwed up, because although he could perhaps yell things at individuals holding signs for a candidate, because under the law, there's a bit of a loophole. They're not covered under the voter intimidation law unless they're voting themselves. Well, you can't still approach someone with a machete. That's aggravated assault. That's when you are threatening harm to someone. You have a big, your big weapon over your head. That's a second-degree felony if you do it to a person who's over 65. And if it's under 65, it's a third-degree felony. So it really screwed up because, yeah, there may be some gray area about doing this to someone who is not a voter. But what I've also seen is that people who are volunteering for campaigns can also vote. And if they're also there that day to vote, because a lot of people who volunteer are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to vote too. Well, then the perpetrator can be charged, even if it's against a campaign worker. If that campaign worker is planning on voting that day or is about to vote, yeah, that could be a charge. So this is going on across the country, and law enforcement and prosecutors are on alert. But you would hope that when these things happen that people are going to be wearing a pair of steel bracelets, a pair of handcuffs, and an orange jumpsuit, because you can't allow this to happen to intimidate people, to keep people from the polls. Now, we're seeing massive turnout pretty much all across the country. And so the fact that there are individuals who are trying to intimidate others, it looks like it's not working, and it looks like some of them are going to be spending the election behind bars. And ironically, this 18-year-old Caleb Williams, who was allegedly trying to intimidate these two volunteers, well, in so doing, it looks like he may lose the right to vote himself. In Florida, if you commit a felony, you're not eligible to vote if you've been convicted. Okay, I know what you're thinking, Donald Trump, right? Yes, well, that's a whole nother matter. In Florida, it's a little ambiguous as to whether the prohibition begins after your direct appeals are done or right away. And in Florida, you have Republicans who rule the state, and they're not going to allow Trump to be bumped from the voter rolls this cycle, so he voted. But that doesn't necessarily hold true for others, like this 18-year-old. So if his idea of fun was to go out there and hassle people and be obnoxious at the polls, it definitely backfired. And this goes to another point I want to make. The whole idea of this hidden Trump vote out there, this idea that the polls are underestimating Donald Trump because they may have underestimated him in 2016 and 2020, I don't think that's true anymore. If anything, I think that the pollsters are underestimating the Kamala Harris vote. And what I can say is that when it comes to the Donald Trump voters, those hidden voters or scared Donald Trump voters, I think it's quite the opposite. I've never met a wallflower supporting Donald Trump. I've only met people who go out of their way to tell you that they're supporting Donald Trump, whether they're wearing a red hat or they just bring it up in conversation out of the blue awkwardly when you're not even having a conversation about politics. So if anything, I do think there's a hidden vote for Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump, and I think we'll see that when the results come in. In a statement from the chair of the local Democratic Party there in Duval County, we are deeply concerned about a violent incident today at the Beaches Library where a group of young men carrying Trump flags with one individual armed with a machete confronted peaceful Harris Walls sign waivers exercising their First Amendment rights. This troubling act of intimidation was met with a swift response from the Neptune Beach Police Department, who arrived within minutes to assess and de-escalate the situation. We commend the Neptune Beach Police for their prompt response, which helped ensure the safety of our community members. Following a thorough investigation, the individual brandishing the machete was arrested and now faces felony charges. We are grateful for the vigilance and dedication of law enforcement officers who work to maintain the peace and respond to this incident. I might add that kudos goes to law enforcement there in Neptune Beach. The area is pretty red, and you had a police chief there who said he's not going to put up with this, and it made him really angry. Here's the clip of his comments.
I don't know if you can see the visceral anger I have, but I'm angry at this. I'm extremely angry at this. This group of juveniles probably wasn't using their head, and they weren't thinking very clearly about what they wanted to achieve, because it is, again, one thing to go up and exercise your First Amendment right, which we so dearly take as a sacred right to express. But again, as I said, the moment you move to violence, that goes out the window. And to say I'm disturbed is an understatement. I'm mad that this happened in Neptune Beach.
It's in my experience that when you have incidents like this, they actually steal the desire of individuals to vote for their favorite candidate. So I think if anything, it's going to make people more motivated to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I think that this is the kind of stuff that we not allow to happen. And when you have voter suppression and voter intimidation, I think generally the public reacts in the opposite way, the same way that the police chief reacted. We should all be outraged. So that's some insight on the attempts at voter intimidation, voter coercion. There are laws on the books for it. They're not always used. And even if they're not used, the other laws like aggravated assault against a person 65 and older can be even tougher against them. So as long as law enforcement and prosecutors are doing their job, I think this election is going to be free, fair, safe, and secure, and will lead to the right result. So Meidas Mighty, I'll see you on the other side. I'm Dave Aronberg, aka the Florida Lawman, here on MeidasTouch Network. If you like this video, please like it. Please leave a comment below and share with a friend. Also, check out our sister channel, True Crime MTN, where we discuss the hottest true crime cases across the country. I'll see you over there, and I'll see you here next time.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.